The first thing I remember about that night is the sound of glass. Not breaking. Clinking. A soft, elegant tap of crystal against crystal, like a polite warning before a storm. I stood at the center of the ballroom, my hand wrapped around a half-finished drink I didn't even remember ordering, watching my wife raise her glass with a smile I no longer recognized. "Everyone," she said, her voice smooth, confident, too confident. "Before we celebrate Daniel tonight, I just want to take a moment to thank someone very important." A pause. A deliberate one. Her eyes drifted, not to me, but past me. To him. And to the man who truly holds the power. The room shifted. Not physically, but something in the air tightened. My boss, Richard. Applause. Laughter. Glasses raised. But none of it reached me. Because in that moment, standing there in my own retirement party, planned by my own wife, I realized something cold, sharp, and undeniable. I wasn't the man of the night. I wasn't even part of the story anymore. My name is Daniel Carter. And for 32 years, I worked like hell to build a life I thought mattered. I started at 22, fresh out of college, working double shifts, sleeping in my car some nights just to save money. I clawed my way up from nothing, no family wealth, no connections, just grit and stubbornness. By 40, I was managing regional operations. By 50, I had people reporting to me from 3 different states. And at 57, I was done. Retired. Successful, they called it. Lucky, others said. But standing there that night, watching my wife smile at another man like he was the center of her universe, none of it felt real. None of it felt like mine. Claire and I had been married for 26 years. We met at a bookstore. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through a paperback, arguing with the clerk about some author I'd never heard of. She had this fire in her back then, this spark that made everything feel alive. I fell for her in less than a week. Married her in less than a year. Everyone said we moved too fast. Maybe we did. But for a long time, it worked. Or at least I thought it did. She started working again about 8 years ago. At first, it was just part-time. "I'm bored," she told me. "I need something of my own." I supported her. Of course I did. I'd spent decades building a stable life for us. The least I could do was let her explore something new. That something turned into a full-time position within a year. Then a promotion. Then another. Soon, she was traveling more than I was. Late meetings. Corporate dinners. Weekend conferences. Her phone always buzzing. Always something. I didn't question it. Why would I? She was my wife. "Daniel." The voice snapped me back to the present. I turned. Richard was walking toward me. Tall. Perfectly tailored suit. That kind of smile that didn't ask for approval, it expected it. "The man of the hour," he said, extending his hand. I shook it. Firm grip. Confident. Like he'd been doing this his whole life. "Congratulations," he added. 32 years, that's impressive." "Thank you," I said. Simple. Controlled. Measured. But inside, something twisted. Because as he stood there, talking to me like a colleague, like a peer, I could feel Claire watching us. Not me. Him. Always him. "You must be proud," Richard continued. "I am," I replied. "And Claire's told me so much about you." That caught my attention. "Oh." "Yes," he smiled. "Your discipline, your consistency, your reliability." Reliability. That word. It landed heavier than it should have. "Those are good qualities," I said. "They are," he nodded, "rare too." He glanced over his shoulder. At Claire. She smiled. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Something quiet. Something practiced. Something I wasn't part of. "Dinner will be served shortly," someone announced. The room began to shift. People moved. Chairs scraped softly against polished floors. Conversations blended into a low hum. But I stayed where I was. Watching. Observing. Trying to piece together something that didn't make sense. Because it wasn't just the toast. It wasn't just the words. It was everything around it. The way she stood next to him. Closer than necessary. The way she laughed at his jokes, just a little too hard. The way he touched her arm when he spoke. Casual. Natural. Familiar. Too familiar. Daniel, Claire said, suddenly at my side. I hadn't even seen her approach. You okay? I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I noticed the distance. Not physical. Something deeper. I'm fine, I said. You've been quiet. It's my party, I replied lightly, figured I'd let others talk. She smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. Well, don't disappear on me tonight, okay? Disappear. That word echoed. Because standing there, in that room full of people celebrating my life, I already felt invisible. Dinner passed in a blur. Speeches. Stories. Laughter. People talked about my achievements, my leadership, my dedication. They painted a picture of a man who had it all together. A man who built something meaningful. A man who mattered. But every time I looked across the table, Claire wasn't looking at me. She was looking at him. It happened during dessert. A small moment. Easy to miss. Unless you were paying attention. Which I was. Always had been. She leaned toward Richard, whispering something. He smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a professional one. Something softer. Something personal. And then, her hand, resting briefly, lightly, on his. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A choice. And in that instant, something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. I excused myself. Stepped outside. The night air hit me like a slap. Cool. Sharp. Real. I took a deep breath. Then another. Trying to steady something I couldn't quite name. Because I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to jump to conclusions. Didn't want to be that man. The paranoid husband. The insecure one. But the truth doesn't ask for permission. You shouldn't be out here alone. Her voice. Behind me. I didn't turn immediately. Just stared out into the dark parking lot. I needed air, I said. She stepped beside me. Wrapped her arms around herself. It's a big night, she added. You okay? There it was again. That question. Always the same. Always just enough concern to sound real. I'm fine, I said. A beat. Then I turned. Who is he? Her expression shifted. Just slightly. What do you mean? Richard, I said. Who is he to you? Silence. A long one. Too long. Daniel. No, I cut in. Don't do that. Don't soften it, just answer me. She exhaled. Looked away. He's my boss. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Then finally. He's important. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Yeah, I said, I got that part. She stepped closer. Daniel, you're overthinking this. Am I? Because I've spent decades reading people. Understanding patterns. Noticing shifts. And what I saw tonight wasn't nothing. It didn't feel like nothing, I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. It was just a toast. No, I replied, it was. She didn't argue. Didn't deny it. Didn't explain. She just stood there. And that silence, it said more than any words ever could. You're tired, she said finally. It's been a long day. Deflection. Classic. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Tomorrow. Another word that suddenly felt empty. Because deep down, I already knew. Tomorrow wasn't going to fix anything. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood something she didn't realize yet. This wasn't the beginning of a problem. This was the moment I finally saw it. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. As we walked back inside, the applause started again. Someone raising another toast. Another speech. Another celebration. But this time, I wasn't listening. I was watching. Because for the first time in 26 years, I wasn't sure who my wife really was. And more importantly, I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it. But one thing became clear as I took my seat again, across from her, across from him. This story, it wasn't over. Not even close. The night didn't end when the lights dimmed. That's what people don't tell you about moments like that. They don't explode. They echo. Long after the applause fades, long after the last guest leaves, long after the music dies down and the staff begins clearing plates, those quiet, jagged pieces of truth stay with you. And they get louder. We drove home in silence. Claire stared out the passenger window, her reflection faint against the glass, while I kept my eyes fixed on the road. Neither of us reached for the radio. Neither of us spoke. But the car wasn't quiet. It was full. Heavy with everything neither of us wanted to say first. You embarrass me tonight. Her voice came suddenly. Calm. Controlled. Sharp. I didn't react immediately. Kept driving. Hands steady on the wheel. How? I asked. She turned toward me. That scene outside, she said, the way you question me like that. I let out a slow breath. A scene, I repeated. Yes, Daniel, a scene. I nodded slightly. Because now it made sense. Of course it did. You toasted another man at my retirement party, I said evenly, and I'm the one who made a scene. It was professional, she snapped. You're twisting it into something ugly. Professional. That word again. Like a shield. Like a script she'd rehearsed. I glanced at her briefly. No, I said quietly, I think it already is something ugly. She didn't respond. In that silence, it wasn't guilt. It was irritation. We pulled into the driveway. The house sat exactly the way we'd left it, quiet, familiar, unchanged. But stepping inside, it didn't feel like home anymore. Claire kicked off her heels, setting her purse on the table. I'm going to shower, she said flatly. No eye contact. No hesitation. Just distance. Of course, I replied. Because what else was there to say? I stood alone in the living room. Still dressed. Still holding onto a version of the night that no longer made sense. My retirement party. My celebration. My life. And somehow, I felt like a guest in it. I poured myself a drink. Something stronger this time. Walked over to the window. Looked out into the darkness. And for the first time in years, I started replaying everything. Not just tonight. All of it. The late nights. The sudden business trips. The way she started locking her phone. The subtle shift in her tone whenever she mentioned work. And him. Richard. Always mentioned just enough to seem normal. Never enough to raise questions. Until tonight. Until she made sure everyone in that room knew exactly who he was. I took a sip. Let it burn. Because now, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was connecting. The bathroom door clicked open behind me. Steam drifted into the hallway. I didn't turn. You're still up, she asked. I couldn't sleep. A pause. Then her footsteps. Slow. Measured. You're making this bigger than it is, she said. There it was again. Minimizing. Reducing. Shrinking something that felt anything but small. Then make me understand, I said. Silence. I turned this time. She stood there in a robe, hair damp, arms folded. Guarded. Always guarded now. What exactly do you think is going on? She asked. I studied her. Not as my wife. Not as the woman I built a life with. But as someone I needed to read. I think, I said slowly, that you crossed a line tonight. Her jaw tightened. With a toast. With everything. Another silence. Longer this time. And then, you're insecure. The word landed harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because of how easily she said it. Like it was ready. Like she'd been waiting to use it. I'm observant, I replied. No, she said, shaking her head. You're projecting. Projecting. Another deflection. Another way to turn it around. I almost smiled. Because suddenly, this felt less like a conversation. And more like a pattern. You didn't deny it, I said. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. Deny what? She asked. That something is going on. There is nothing going on. Too quick. Too clean. Too practiced. I stepped closer. Not aggressive. Just enough to close the space between us. Then why did it feel like I was watching two people who forgot I was in the room? That hit. I saw it. The shift. The crack. Small. But real. You're imagining things, she said, quieter now. No, I replied, I don't think I am. We stood there. Two people in the same house. Speaking the same language. But living in completely different realities. Daniel, she began. And this time, her voice changed. Softer. Careful. Like she was choosing her words more strategically. You just retired, she said. That's a big adjustment. You're used to control, structure. Now everything feels different. I almost laughed. Because it was impressive. The way she reframed it. The way she shifted the narrative. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. My transition. My emotions. My instability. You think this is about retirement? I asked. I think you're overwhelmed, she said. I nodded slowly. Because now, I understood something very clearly. She wasn't going to tell me the truth. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Okay, I said. And that word surprised her. I saw it in her eyes. The confusion. The slight relief. Okay, she repeated. Yeah, I said calmly, you're right. She blinked. Caught off guard. I am. Of course, I nodded. Big day, lot of emotions, probably reading too much into things. She relaxed. Just a little. Enough to think the storm had passed. Exactly, she said softly. Exactly. But here's what she didn't understand. I wasn't agreeing with her. I was stepping back. Because sometimes, you don't confront the truth head-on. You let it reveal itself. I'm going to get some sleep, I said. Good, she replied. And just like that, the conversation ended. But the story, it had just begun. That night I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing beside me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. At 2:17 a.m. Her phone buzzed. Soft. Brief. But enough. Her hand moved instantly. Too fast for someone asleep. She grabbed it. Turned slightly away from me. Shielding the screen. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't react. But in that moment, everything became clear. Because people can lie with words. They can deflect. Deny. Twist. But instinct. Instinct tells the truth. And hers just did. A few seconds later, she stood up quietly. Walked out of the bedroom. Taking the phone with her. closing the door just enough to think it wouldn't wake me. But I was wide awake. I counted the seconds, not because I needed to, but because it gave me something to hold on to. 1 minute. 2. 5. Then finally, the faint sound of her voice. From down the hall. Low. Careful. Intimate. I got out of bed. Slowly. Silently. Moved toward the door. Each step measured. Each breath controlled. And then, I heard it. Clear enough. Sharp enough. Unmistakable. I told you tonight was complicated. A pause. Then softer. No, he didn't suspect anything, not really. Something inside me went cold. Because I didn't need to hear the other side of that conversation. I already knew who it was. Richard. And just like that, the last piece fell into place. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't insecurity. This wasn't imagination. This was betrayal. Real. Deliberate. Ongoing. I stepped back. Quietly. Carefully. Returning to bed before she came back. Because now, everything had changed. And for the first time that night, I wasn't hurt. I was focused. Because if there's one thing 32 years of building a career taught me, it's this. You don't react emotionally when you're about to make a strategic move. And Claire, she had no idea that the man she thought she had under control had just started paying attention. Really paying attention. And once I did, there was no going back. There's a moment, right before everything changes, when the world feels perfectly still. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just suspended. Like it's waiting. That's where I lived for the next 2 weeks. I didn't confront her. Didn't argue. Didn't accuse. Because I already had the truth. And truth, when handled correctly, doesn't need noise. It needs patience. Claire thought things had settled. She went back to her routines. Morning coffee. Work calls. Late evenings. Subtle smiles at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. But now, I was looking. I noticed everything. The way she angled her screen. The specific tone in her voice when she said his name. The meetings that always seemed to run just a little too long. And most importantly, I stopped being predictable. Because for 26 years, I had been the steady one. The reliable one. The man who showed up. The man who trusted. And she built her secret life around that version of me. That was her mistake. I started leaving the house more. At first, casually. Gym. Errands. Catching up with old colleagues. She didn't question it. Why would she? She thought she understood me. But I wasn't doing any of those things. I was preparing. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. Not because I doubted what I saw, but because I needed proof. Clear. Undeniable. Within 4 days, I had it. Photos. Messages. Hotel records. Time-stamped. Precise. Claire and Richard. Together. Not just once. Not just recently. Months. Maybe longer. The second thing I did was something she never would have expected. I met Richard. Not as a husband. Not as a victim. But as a man who wanted to understand the person standing across from him. I called his office. Scheduled a meeting. Professional. Neutral. Controlled. When I walked in, he looked surprised, but not nervous. That told me everything I needed to know about him. Daniel, he said, standing up, didn't expect this. I figured we should talk, I replied. We shook hands again. Just like the party. Firm. Measured. But this time, I wasn't the same man. We sat down. Glass walls. City skyline behind him. Everything about his office screamed power. Control. Influence. How can I help you? He asked. Straight to business. I respected that. I want to understand something, I said calmly. He leaned back slightly. Listening. Calculating. My wife, I continued. What exactly is she to you? A pause. Not long. But enough. Then he smiled. Not arrogantly. Not dismissively. Just honestly. That depends, he said. On what? On how much you already know. There it was. No denial. No confusion. No pretending. I nodded slowly. Enough, I said. Another pause. Then, I didn't plan it, he added. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. No one ever does, I replied. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, I said. And for the first time, his expression changed. Because now, he realized something. This wasn't a confrontation. This was a negotiation. You're going to end it, I continued. He didn't respond immediately. Just watched me. Carefully. And if I do, he asked. Fair question. I reached into my folder, pulled out a photograph, placed it on the table. Him. Claire. A hotel lobby. Close. Intimate. Unmistakable. I make sure this becomes very public, I said calmly. His eyes dropped to the photo. Then back to me. You de-ruin her too, he said. No, I replied. She's already done that herself. Silence. Heavy. Real. I'm not asking, I added. I'm informing you. Another long pause. Then finally. You're serious. I leaned back. Very. He exhaled slowly. Ran a hand across his jaw. All right, he said. Just like that. Because men like him. They don't lose. Unless they realize. They already have. But Richard wasn't the end of it. Claire was. I didn't confront her immediately. Not yet. Because I wanted her to feel it. The shift. The distance. The quiet. Over the next few days, I changed. Subtly. But noticeably. I stopped asking about her day. Stopped engaging in her stories. Stopped reacting. And people notice when you stop reacting. Are you okay? She asked one night. The same question she always used. This time, I smiled. I'm great, I said. And that's when she felt it. The first crack. Because something about that answer didn't feel like me. You've been distant, she added. I shrugged. Have I? Now she was watching me. The same way I had been watching her. And that's when the balance started to shift. The confrontation happened 3 nights later. She found the envelope. I didn't hide it well, because I wanted her to find it. Photos. Printed. Neatly arranged. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. Daniel. Her voice. Different this time. Not controlled. Not confident. Shaken. I turned slowly. She stood there, holding the truth in her hands. What is this? She asked. I looked at the photos, then back at her. You tell me. Her face changed. Color draining. Breathing uneven. It's not, she started. I raised a hand. No, I said calmly, don't insult me. Silence. And then, for the first time in 26 years, she didn't have a script. Daniel, I can explain. Of course she could. They always can. But explanations don't change reality. I'm not interested, I said. She stepped closer. Desperate now. It didn't mean anything. I laughed. Soft. Cold. You don't risk a marriage for something that means nothing. Tears filled her eyes. It just happened. No, I replied, it didn't. Another pause. And then, the question she didn't want to ask. What are you going to do? I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a choice. I'm leaving, I said. The words hit harder than anything else. What? She whispered. I'm done. She shook her head. No, we can fix this. Fix. Another word that sounded empty now. There's nothing to fix, I replied. She broke then. Really broke. Crying. Grabbing my arm. Please, Daniel, don't throw everything away. Everything. I gently pulled my arm free. You already did. I moved out the next morning. No drama. No shouting. Just silence. And sometimes, that's the loudest ending there is. A month later, I heard through a mutual contact. Richard transferred offices. Quietly. No announcement. No explanation. Just gone. And Claire. She tried calling. Texting. Apologizing. Begging. But some things, once broken, don't get rebuilt. 6 months later, I was sitting on a beach in California. Sun low. Waves steady. A life I never planned, but one I finally understood. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. And sometimes, losing everything you thought you had is the only way to see what you actually deserve. And me. I finally saw it. Clearly. For the first time in a long time. Peace. Real peace. And it didn't come from holding on. It came from walking away.